My son was believed to be dead, leaving millions, but at his funeral, he suddenly laughed as his wife's lover spoke. My son's funeral was supposed to make me $8 million richer. I'm Ian Harding, and 3 hours ago I buried my 31-year-old son, Calvin, the only thing standing between me and the biggest inheritance of my life. My wife Ione sat in the county jail, arrested for poisoning him with oleander extract. The evidence was overwhelming. Her fingerprints on the bottle, her nursing background giving her the knowledge, her motive crystal clear. Then Calvin's business partner stood up to give the eulogy. He spoke about Calvin's brilliant legal mind, his dedication to justice, his plans for the future. Beautiful words about a dead man's legacy. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Quiet at first, then building to something that made my blood freeze. I turned around. In the back row, someone was filming everything on their phone, shaking with barely contained amusement. The person looked up, pulled off their baseball cap. It was Calvin, very much alive, very much enjoying the show. Want to know how this impossible nightmare unfolded? Hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This story will change how you think about family forever, because what happened next destroyed everything I thought I knew about my own son. The signs were there for months. I just refused to see them. Calvin had always been different from me. Where I'd built pinnacle manufacturing with calloused hands and 18-hour days, he'd sailed through Harvard Law on my dime. Where I spoke in simple terms about honest work, he spoke in legal jargon that made me feel stupid in my own boardroom. "Dad, your business model is so 1990s, he'd say during our monthly family dinners. "You're sitting on a gold mine, but you're too sentimental to mine it properly." He meant selling the company. Calvin had been pushing that idea since he graduated law school. $8.3 million was the latest valuation, money that represented 37 years of my life. But Calvin saw it as inheritance. He was tired of waiting for. The worst part was how he treated Ione. "She's a nurse, Dad. Think about that." Calvin would use that tone lawyers use when they think they're being clever. Former emergency room nurse who conveniently fell in love with a millionaire widower. You don't see the pattern? Ione never fought back. She'd just squeeze my hand under the dinner table and change the subject. She'd been a cardiac ICU nurse for 12 years before we met. She'd seen people die, saved lives, worked night shifts that would break most people. But Calvin made her sound like some scheming gold digger. "Your son thinks I married you for money," Ione told me one night in bed. "He's going to make our lives miserable until he gets what he wants." I should have listened to her. Instead, I made excuses. "He's protective. His mother died when he was 16. It's hard for him to accept another woman in my life." But that wasn't it. Calvin wasn't protective. He was territorial. Every conversation we had came back to the will, the business, what would happen when something happens to you, Dad. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving dinner last year. Calvin brought his girlfriend Sarah, Dr. Sarah Fleming, a beautiful redhead who worked at Hartford Hospital. Smart woman, but something cold in her eyes. "Ian, you should really consider estate planning," Sarah had said over turkey. "At your age, unexpected health events are statistically probable." I was 59, not 90, but Calvin nodded along like she was sharing profound wisdom. "Sarah's right, Dad. Look at your blood pressure. Look at how stressed you get about the business. Ione knows the signs to watch for, don't you?" The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was already planning my funeral. That night, Ione and I had our first real fight. "He's dangerous, Ian. Your son is dangerous. He's young and ambitious. Maybe a little impatient. No, he's calculating. He watches me like I'm some kind of threat to his inheritance. And that girlfriend of his? She asks too many questions about your health." I thought Ione was being paranoid. Calvin was my son. Blood of my blood. The boy I'd raised alone after his mother's car accident. The kid I'd worked 80-hour weeks to put through private school, then Harvard. But blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. I learned that the hard way. The manipulation was subtle at first. Calvin would schedule business lunches where he'd outline plans for expanding pinnacle manufacturing, plans that required me to take on massive debt, or sell equity to investors. When I resisted, he'd sigh like I was some stubborn old man standing in the way of progress. "You built something incredible, Dad, but you're thinking too small. We could franchise this. Go national. Make real money." Real money. As if the 8.3 million wasn't real enough. The final insult came in August. Calvin had prepared incorporation papers for Pinnacle Holdings, a parent company that would own my manufacturing business. He'd be CEO. I'd be Chairman Emeritus. "It's just on paper, Dad. You'd still make all the big decisions. But this protects your assets if something happens." If something happens. There was that phrase again. I refused to sign. That's when Calvin's mask started slipping. September 1st changed everything. The call came at 6:30 a.m. Detective Murphy O'Brien, Westfield County Sheriff's Department. His voice was professional but grim. "Mr. Harding, I'm sorry to inform you that your son Calvin has been found deceased at his residence. We need you to come to the station immediately." The world stopped. My son, my only child, dead at 31. "How?" was all I could manage. "We're investigating. But sir, we've arrested your wife in connection with his death." Ione was still in bed next to me, peaceful in sleep. Within 3 hours, she was in handcuffs. The police had found a bottle of oleander extract in our kitchen garbage. Highly toxic. Calvin's girlfriend Sarah had identified it as the substance that killed him. She'd performed the emergency room examination when his body was brought in. "Mrs. Harding's fingerprints are on the bottle," Detective O'Brien explained. "She had access to your son's apartment. She knew his schedule, and as a former ICU nurse, she would have known exactly how much oleander extract would be fatal." The motive, they said, was obvious. With Calvin dead, the entire $8.3 million inheritance would flow directly to me. And as my wife, Ione, would eventually inherit everything. She eliminated the obstacle, the prosecutor told the media. Calvin Harding stood between his stepmother and a fortune, so she removed him. The local news picked up the story within hours. Nurse accused of poisoning stepson for millions. The cameras gathered outside our house like vultures. Our neighbors avoided eye contact. 37-year building a reputation in this community, and it was crumbling in real time. But the money was the least of it. Ione sat in the county jail, facing first-degree murder charges. Connecticut still had the death penalty for the most heinous cases. My wife, the woman who'd never hurt a fly, who volunteered at the animal shelter, who cried during sad movies, was being painted as a calculating killer. "I've never even heard of oleander extract," she told me during visiting hours. Her hand shook as she spoke through the plexiglass barrier. "Ian, I swear to you, I didn't do this." I believed her, but belief wouldn't hold up in court. The evidence against Ione was circumstantial but damning. Her nursing background gave her the knowledge. Her access to Calvin's apartment gave her the opportunity. The inheritance gave her the motive. Calvin's will was ironclad. He'd written it himself, being a lawyer. If he died, his share of the family trust would revert to me immediately. No probate delays, no legal challenges, just a clean $8.3 million transfer. The funeral home called about arrangements. Calvin's body would be released after the autopsy. Did I want burial or cremation? Open casket or closed? How many people should they prepare for? I was planning my son's funeral while my wife sat in jail accused of his murder. The business started suffering immediately. Pinnacle Manufacturing had contracts with 3 major defense contractors. Government security clearances require moral character assessments. Having a wife accused of murder wasn't exactly sterling character. Our attorney, Timothy Walsh, was blunt about the timeline. "Ian, if Ione goes to trial, this process could take 2 years. 2 years of legal fees, media coverage, and public speculation. Even if she's acquitted, the damage to both your reputations might be irreparable." The life insurance payout was another complication. Calvin had a $127,000 policy through his law firm. Murder cases put insurance companies on high alert. They'd investigate every angle before paying out. If they determine Ione is responsible, the policy becomes void, Timothy explained. But if Calvin died of natural causes or accident, the money goes to his estate, which means it flows to you. Either way, I'd profit from my son's death. The optics were terrible. 48 hours. That's what Detective O'Brien gave me before they'd formally charge Ione with first-degree murder. After that, Mr. Harding, this becomes a capital case. We're talking about the death penalty. I had 2 days to prove my wife's innocence. I just didn't know my son was still alive. The funeral was supposed to be Calvin's final performance. 300 people packed St. Mary's Episcopal Church. Calvin's law partners gave eulogies about his brilliant legal mind and dedication to justice. His college friends shared stories about his ambition and drive. I sat in the front pew, numb with grief and rage. Ione should have been beside me, but she was in a cell instead. That's when I heard it. The sound that didn't belong. Laughter. Quiet at first, then building to a chuckle. I turned around, scanning the crowd. In the back row, a figure in dark glasses and a baseball cap was filming everything on his phone. He was shaking, not with grief, but with suppressed laughter. The man looked up. Our eyes met. It was Calvin. My dead son was recording his own funeral. The rational part of my brain tried to make sense of it. Mistaken identity, grief hallucination, stress-induced breakdown. But Calvin pulled off the baseball cap, ran his fingers through that distinctive black hair, and grinned at me. The same grin he'd worn as a kid when he'd gotten away with something. I stood up slowly, ignoring the confused murmurs around me. Calvin pocketed his phone and slipped toward the exit. I followed him outside. "Hello, Dad." "You're dead." The words felt stupid coming out of my mouth. Apparently not. "Calvin, what the hell?" "Save the dramatics. We both know why I had to do this." "Do what? Fake your own death? Frame Ione for murder?" Calvin shrugged like we were discussing the weather. "Frame is such an ugly word. I'd call it repositioning assets. Your stepmother's in jail." "Where she belongs." The casualness in his voice made my blood freeze. "She belongs in jail?" "Dad, think about it logically. You're 59. Statistically, you've got maybe 20 good years left. Ione is 45. She could live another 40 years. That's 40 years of my inheritance being spent on someone who has no blood connection to our family. She's my wife." "She's an obstacle." Calvin pulled out his phone and showed me a video. It was Ione in our kitchen handling a small brown bottle. This was taken 6 weeks ago. Watch carefully. In the video, Ione was organizing our medicine cabinet. She picked up various bottles, reading labels, sorting them into different piles. The brown bottle in question was one of many. "She's organizing pills," I said. "She's familiarizing herself with toxins. This bottle contained oleander extract, highly poisonous, fatal in small doses." "Why would we have oleander extract?" "You wouldn't, but someone planted it there. Someone who needed Ione's fingerprints on the evidence." The pieces were clicking together, but I didn't want to believe it. "You set her up." "I protected our family's legacy." "Calvin, she's innocent." "Dad, she married you for money. Everyone knows it except you." "That's not true." "Really? A 45-year-old nurse marries a millionaire widower and suddenly develops deep feelings? Come on. She loves me. She loves your bank account." I wanted to hit him. My own son standing there alive while his stepmother sat in jail, and all he could do was justify it with math. "People saw your body, Calvin. The hospital examined you. How is any of this possible?" "Sarah helped. She's quite talented." Dr. Sarah Fleming, Calvin's girlfriend. The emergency room doctor who'd examined his corpse. "You both planned this?" "For 3 months. Every detail." "The oleander extract?" "Ordered online, planted in your kitchen, easy to trace back to Ione." "The fingerprints?" "She handles everything in that kitchen. We just made sure the bottle was there for her to touch." "The death certificate?" "Sarah signed it. She has the authority." Calvin was describing a conspiracy like it was a business plan. Clinical, methodical, no remorse. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you mourn your son's tragic death. Ione gets convicted. You inherit everything clean. I disappear for a few years, then resurface with a new identity. We split the money. And if I refuse? Dad, the evidence against Ione is overwhelming. She's going to prison whether you cooperate or not. The only question is whether you profit from it. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a partnership. With my son's killer? Calvin laughed again. That same cold sound I'd heard in the church. Dad, I'm not dead. Nobody killed me. This is just creative estate planning. It's fraud. It's conspiracy. It's brilliant. And it's already in motion. Calvin started walking toward a black sedan parked across the street. Think it over, Dad. You've got until the trial starts. After that, there's no way back. He got in the car and drove away, leaving me standing in the church parking lot next to my son's empty hearse. That night I couldn't sleep. Calvin's words echoed in my head. It's already in motion. But Calvin had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his old man. 37 years in manufacturing teaches you to spot flaws in any system. You learn to trace problems back to their source. You develop relationships with people who know how to fix things or break them. I called Timothy Walsh at home. Ian, Jesus, it's midnight. Tim, I need to ask you something about Calvin's will. Can't this wait until morning? He amended it 6 weeks ago. You filed the paperwork. Silence on the other end. Tim? How do you know about the amendment? Because my son just told me. He's alive, Tim. That's impossible. I saw the death certificate myself. Forged. His girlfriend Sarah signed it. She's a doctor at Hartford Hospital. Timothy Walsh had been my attorney for 15 years. He'd handled the purchase of my house, the incorporation of Pinnacle Manufacturing, even my prenup with Ione. If anyone could spot legal irregularities, it was Tim. Ian, if Calvin is alive, then everything changes. The will, the inheritance, the insurance policy, it's all fraud. Can you prove it? Maybe, but I'll need help. The next morning, I made a second call. Detective Murphy O'Brien had given me his card during Ione's arrest. Good cop, bad situation. But something in his voice suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of Ione's guilt. Detective, it's Ian Harding. I need to speak with you about my son's case. Mr. Harding, I can't discuss an ongoing investigation. My son is alive. Long pause. Sir, I understand you're grieving, but I saw him yesterday at his own funeral. He's been planning this for months. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth, and I think you already suspect it. Another pause, longer this time. What makes you think I suspect anything? Because you're a good cop, and good cops notice when evidence is too convenient. Detective O'Brien had 20 years on the force. He'd worked fraud cases, domestic violence, even a few murder investigations. In my gut, I knew he'd seen something that didn't add up. Mr. Harding, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to fake their own death, they'd need professional help. Medical expertise, someone with access to death certificates. Like an emergency room doctor? Hypothetically. Detective, what would you need to prove fraud? Evidence, real evidence, not just a grieving father's wishful thinking. What kind of evidence? Phone records, financial transactions, witness statements, medical documentation that contradicts the official death certificate. And if I could help you find that evidence, hypothetically, I'd be very interested in what you discovered. I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in days, hope. My third call was to someone Calvin didn't even know existed. Dr. Zuri Martinez, Chief Medical Examiner for Westfield County. We'd met at a charity function last year. Her daughter had leukemia, and Pinnacle Manufacturing had sponsored her treatment. Dr. Martinez, it's Ian Harding. We met at the Children's Hospital fundraiser. Of course, Ian, I'm so sorry about your son and the situation with your wife. That's what I'm calling about. I have reason to believe Calvin's death certificate is fraudulent. That's a very serious allegation. I know, but if someone forged medical documentation, you'd be able to spot it, wouldn't you? Absolutely. Death certificates have specific protocols, security features, chain of custody requirements. Fraud is usually easy to detect if you know what to look for. Would you be willing to examine Calvin's death certificate? Officially, I can't interfere with another doctor's findings. And unofficially? Unofficially, if there's medical fraud happening in my county, I want to know about it. I was building a team without Calvin realizing it. Timothy Walsh would handle the legal angles. Detective O'Brien would pursue the criminal investigation. Dr. Martinez would expose the medical fraud. But I needed more. I needed evidence so overwhelming that Calvin couldn't talk his way out of it. That's when I remembered the security cameras. Pinnacle Manufacturing had a state-of-the-art surveillance system, motion sensors, night vision, 30-day storage capacity. But more importantly, I had cameras at my house. Cameras that had been recording everything for the past 6 months. Calvin thought he was the smartest person in the room. He was about to learn otherwise. The next morning, I drove to the county jail for visiting hours. Ione looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, orange jumpsuit that made her look like a stranger. But when she saw me through the plexiglass, she managed a weak smile. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "I keep thinking this is all a nightmare, that I'll wake up and Calvin will be alive and none of this will have happened." I wanted to tell her the truth, that Calvin was alive, that this was all an elaborate con, but not here, not with guards listening, not until I had proof. "Ione, I need you to trust me." "I do trust you." "I'm going to get you out of here." "Ian, the evidence is fake." She stared at me through the glass. "What do you mean?" "I can't explain everything right now, but someone set you up. Someone who knew exactly how to make you look guilty." "Who would do that?" I couldn't say Calvin's name, not yet, but I could see the understanding creeping into her eyes. Someone who had everything to gain from your conviction. That afternoon, I went to the police station. Detective O'Brien met me in an interview room, along with a woman I didn't recognize. "Mr. Harding, this is Detective Lisa Santos. She specializes in insurance fraud cases." Detective Santos was probably 40, sharp eyes, no-nonsense attitude. She looked like someone who'd seen every scam in the book. "Mr. Harding, Detective O'Brien tells me you have information about your son's death. I believe my son faked his death to frame my wife and collect insurance money." "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" "I'm working on it. But I need to know, what kind of evidence would you need to investigate insurance fraud?" "Documentation showing the death was staged. Medical evidence contradicting the death certificate. Financial motive. Conspiracy between multiple parties." "What if I told you my son is a lawyer who recently amended his will, and his girlfriend is the emergency room doctor who signed his death certificate?" Detective Santos leaned forward. "Now that's interesting." "There's more. The life insurance policy was purchased 6 months ago, right around the time Calvin started talking about estate planning." "How much?" $127,000. "Not enough to risk murder charges," Detective Santos said, "unless there's a bigger payday involved." 8.3 million. "That's what my son stands to inherit when I die." "But he's already dead," Detective O'Brien pointed out, "which means the inheritance flows directly to me, and when I die, it goes to my wife." "Unless your wife is convicted of murder," Detective Santos finished, "then it would revert to Calvin's estate." "Even if Calvin is dead?" "If Calvin is alive and his death was faked, then his will becomes irrelevant. But if his death appears legitimate, then legally, the money follows the will." The pieces were falling into place. Calvin hadn't just faked his death. He'd created a complex financial shell game designed to give him access to millions while keeping his hands clean. "Detectives, I need to ask you something. If I could prove Calvin is alive, what would happen to the charges against my wife?" "They'd be dropped immediately," Detective O'Brien said, "but proving someone faked their death is extremely difficult." "What if I had video evidence?" Both detectives sat up straighter. "What kind of video evidence?" Detective Santos asked. "The kind that shows Calvin alive and well, planning this entire scheme." I told them about the funeral, about seeing Calvin in the back row, about our conversation in the parking lot. I told them about Dr. Sarah Fleming's involvement, about the planted oleander extract, about the forged death certificate. "Mr. Harding, these are explosive allegations," Detective O'Brien said. "If you're wrong, if I'm wrong, my wife goes to prison for a crime she didn't commit. If I'm right, we're looking at conspiracy, fraud, perjury, and filing false reports. And if you're lying to interfere with a murder investigation, then arrest me too," Detective Santos exchanged a look with Detective O'Brien. Mr. Harding, we're willing to investigate your claims, but we need evidence, real evidence. Give me 48 hours. We can give you 24. After that, the prosecutor is filing formal charges. I left the police station knowing the clock was ticking, but I also knew Calvin was about to make his biggest mistake. That evening, my phone rang. Calvin's number. Dad, I heard you visited the police station today. How did you... I have friends everywhere, including the police department. Of course he did. Calvin had spent 3 years as a prosecutor before going into private practice. He knew cops, judges, court clerks. He'd built a network of contacts throughout the legal system. What do you want, Calvin? I want you to stop embarrassing yourself. You're telling people I'm alive. That's the grief talking. I saw you at the funeral. You saw what you wanted to see. A father desperate to believe his son isn't really kind. Calvin was gaslighting me, making me sound unstable, unreliable, delusional. The police are investigating insurance fraud. Let them investigate. They'll find exactly what they expect to find. A clear case of murder motivated by greed. Calvin, this has to stop. Ione is innocent. Ione is a gold digger who got caught, and you're a grieving father who can't accept reality. I know you're alive. Dad, I'm dead. I have the death certificate to prove it. The line went dead. But Calvin had made his crucial error. He'd confirmed that he was monitoring my movements, tracking my phone calls, staying informed about the investigation. A dead man couldn't do any of those things. Now, I just had to prove it. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Dr. Zuri Martinez. She called me at 7 a.m., voice tight with controlled anger. Mr. Harding, I've examined your son's death certificate. We need to meet immediately. What did you find? Not over the phone. Can you be at my office in 1 hour? Dr. Martinez's office was in the county medical examiner building, a sterile white facility that smelled like disinfectant and death. She met me at the security desk personally. Ian, what I'm about to show you could destroy careers and potentially invalidate dozens of medical documents. She led me to her office and spread Calvin's death certificate across her desk like evidence in a trial. This document is a forgery, a very sophisticated one, but a forgery nonetheless. How can you tell? 3 things. First, the paper stock is wrong. Official Connecticut death certificates use a specific watermarked paper that's only available to licensed medical facilities. This was printed on high-quality resume paper. She pointed to a corner of the document where the watermark should have been visible. Second, the security numbers are sequential, but they're from a batch that was issued to Hartford Hospital 6 months ago. Those numbers should have been used up by now. And third, the signature is wrong. I know No Dr. Sarah Fleming's signature. We went to medical school together. This isn't how she signs official documents. Dr. Martinez pulled out a file folder containing other documents signed by Dr. Fleming. Look at the difference. In her real signature, she always makes a small loop in the F of Fleming. It's a quirk she's had since medical school. But this death certificate, no loop. Someone was copying her signature but didn't know about that detail. I felt my heart rate accelerate. Finally, concrete proof. Dr. Martinez, would you be willing to testify to this? Absolutely. Medical fraud is a felony. If Dr. Fleming is involved in this scheme, she'll lose her license and face criminal charges. And if she was coerced somehow, then she needs to come forward immediately. Every day, this fraudulent death certificate remains active. It's being used to justify holding an innocent woman in jail. I called Timothy Walsh from the parking lot. Tim, I need you to meet me at your office right now and bring everything you have on Calvin's will amendment. Ian, it's 8 in the morning. Calvin's death certificate is forged. We have proof. 30 minutes later, Timothy Walsh spread Calvin's will documents across his conference table. His paralegal, a sharp woman named Maria Santos, assisted with the analysis. Ian, there's something very strange about the timing of Calvin's will amendment, Timothy said. Strange how? He made 3 changes 6 weeks ago. First, he updated his beneficiary information to ensure that if he died, his portion of your family trust would immediately revert to you. That's standard inheritance law. Yes, but normally there would be a probate period. Calvin specifically waived that requirement. Very unusual. Maria pointed to a clause buried in the legal language. Mr. Harding, your son also included what's called a survivorship provision. If you die within 12 months of his death, the entire inheritance would flow to his designated backup beneficiary. Who's the backup beneficiary? Timothy flipped through several pages. A company called Meridian Holdings, LLC, incorporated in Delaware 6 weeks ago. I felt my stomach drop. Who owns Meridian Holdings? That's where it gets interesting, Maria said. Delaware LLCs can have anonymous ownership, but they still need a registered agent. And the registered agent for Meridian Holdings is Dr. Sarah Fleming. The conspiracy was bigger than I'd thought. Calvin hadn't just faked his death. He'd created a corporate structure to funnel money through his girlfriend's name. There's more, Timothy continued. Calvin also purchased that life insurance policy through Meridian Holdings, so if he dies, the company collects the payout. $127,000. Right, but here's what's really clever. If you die within the next 12 months, supposedly from grief or stress over losing your son, then Meridian Holdings inherits everything. $8.3 million plus the insurance money. I stared at the documents, seeing Calvin's plan with crystal clarity. He'd faked his death to remove Ione from the inheritance equation, but the real target was me. He was counting on the stress of Ione's trial to kill me. Literally. Tim, can this will be challenged? If Calvin is alive, absolutely. The entire document becomes void the moment we prove he's breathing. And Meridian Holdings? If it was created specifically to commit fraud, a judge can dissolve it and freeze all assets. My phone buzzed. Detective O'Brien. Mr. Harding, can you come to the station? We found something you need to see. At the police station, Detective Santos led me to a computer terminal. We pulled phone records for Dr. Sarah Fleming. Look at this pattern. The screen showed a timeline of calls between Sarah and an unknown number. Dozens of calls over the past 3 months, including several on the day Calvin supposedly died. The unknown number is registered to a burner phone purchased with cash 6 weeks ago, Detective Santos explained. Calvin's phone? That's what we think. But here's the smoking gun. There were 3 calls between Dr. Fleming and this burner phone on September 1st, after Calvin was supposedly dead. Dead men don't make phone calls. Exactly. And there's more. We traced the GPS data from Dr. Fleming's phone. On September 1st, she was at Hartford Hospital during her shift, but her phone also pinged cell towers near Calvin's apartment twice that day, once in the morning when the body was discovered, and once in the evening after she'd signed the death certificate. She was coordinating the entire thing. That's our theory. She signs the fraudulent death certificate, then meets with Calvin to confirm the plan worked. Detective O'Brien joined us at the computer. Mr. Harding, we have enough evidence to arrest Dr. Fleming for medical fraud, but we want to catch Calvin too. How? We need him to surface, to make contact, to do something that proves he's alive. He's been monitoring my movements, tracking my phone calls. Then let's give him something to track. Detective Santos leaned forward. Mr. Harding, would you be willing to wear a wire? The plan was simple but dangerous. I would meet Calvin publicly, somewhere with witnesses, and get him to admit his involvement on tape. But it had to look natural, like a chance encounter rather than a setup. There's one problem, I told the detectives. Calvin is paranoid. He'll suspect a trap. Then we need to give him a reason to take the risk, Detective O'Brien said. What kind of reason? Make him think he's won, that you're ready to cooperate. I thought about Calvin's arrogance, his belief that he was smarter than everyone around him. His fatal flaw wasn't paranoia, it was pride. I know exactly how to do this. The wire felt cold against my chest as I walked into Starbucks on Main Street. Calvin was already there, sitting in the back corner booth, wearing designer sunglasses despite being indoors. He looked relaxed, confident, a man who believed his plan was working perfectly. Hello, Dad. I sat down across from him, fighting every instinct to grab him by the throat. Calvin, you look tired. The stress must be overwhelming. It is. I'm sorry about Ione's situation, but honestly, it's probably for the best. The recorder taped to my chest was picking up every word. Detective Santos and Detective O'Brien were monitoring from a van outside. "Calvin, I want to make a deal." "I'm listening." "I'll cooperate with your plan, but I need guarantees." Calvin leaned forward, interested. "What kind of guarantees?" "I want Ione protected. When this is over, she can't be harmed." "Dad, she's going to prison for murder. I can't control what happens to her there." "Yes, you can, because you're going to help me prove her innocence." Calvin's expression shifted slightly. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me. We're going to find new evidence that clears Ione. Evidence that points to someone else." "That's impossible." "Is it? You managed to fake your own death and frame an innocent woman. Surely you can manufacture evidence that exonerates her." Calvin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Dad, what are you really asking?" "I'm asking you to fix this. All of it." "Fix what, exactly?" I needed him to be specific, to admit his involvement clearly. "Fix the death certificate you forged. Fix the oleander extract you planted. Fix the fingerprint evidence you manufactured." Calvin smiled coldly. "Dad, I think grief is affecting your judgment. I'm dead, remember? How could I forge anything?" "Cut the act, Calvin. We both know you're alive." "Do we?" "I saw you at the funeral. I'm seeing you right now. You're seeing what stress and grief are making you imagine." Calvin was still trying to gaslight me, even with overwhelming evidence of his fraud, but I needed him to drop the charade completely. "Calvin, the phone records show calls between your burner phone and Sarah's number after your supposed death." His hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. "What phone records?" "The police have them. 47 calls between you and Dr. Fleming over the past 3 months." "That's impossible." "Is it? Because Dr. Fleming's GPS data shows she was at your apartment twice on September 1st. Once to help you fake your death. Once to confirm the death certificate was filed." Calvin's jaw tightened. "Dad, you're making serious accusations." "I'm stating facts. The death certificate is forged. Dr. Martinez confirmed it. Wrong paper, wrong security numbers, wrong signature. Dr. Martinez is mistaken. 3 different forensic experts have examined it. They all agree. It's fake." Calvin pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. "Who are you texting?" I asked. "No one." Calvin put the phone down. "I need to make a call." "To Sarah? To warn her the police are coming?" That got his attention. "What do you mean the police are coming?" "Warrants were issued an hour ago for Dr. Fleming's arrest on charges of medical fraud and conspiracy." Calvin went very still. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check the news." Calvin's fingers flew across his phone screen. His face went pale as he read. "Local doctor arrested in insurance fraud scheme," he read aloud. "Dr. Sarah Fleming, emergency room physician at Hartford Hospital, was taken into custody this morning on charges related to fraudulent death certificates." I watched Calvin's carefully constructed plan crumble in real time. "She'll talk," I said quietly. "Sarah won't say anything." "She's already talking. The police offered her immunity in exchange for testimony about your conspiracy." "That's a lie." "Is it? Because according to Detective Santos, Dr. Fleming provided a detailed statement about how you approached her 3 months ago, how you offered her $50,000 to help fake your death, how you provided the oleander extract and showed her where to plant it." Calvin's mask was finally slipping. "Dad, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You faked your death to steal $8.3 million. You framed Ione to remove her from the inheritance, and you were counting on the stress of her trial to kill me within 12 months, so Meridian Holdings could claim everything. That's not... Delaware LLC registered to Sarah Fleming as agent. Very clever, Calvin. Except Delaware corporate filings are public record." Calvin stood up abruptly. "I need to leave." "Sit down." "Dad, this conversation is over." "No, it's not, because there's something else you don't know." Calvin hesitated. His curiosity was stronger than his caution. "What?" "The insurance company voided your policy this morning. Turns out they investigate all death claims involving medical fraud. When they discovered the forged death certificate, they froze the $127,000. "They can't do that." "They already did. And they're filing charges against Meridian Holdings for attempted insurance fraud. Calvin sat back down heavily. Dad, you've destroyed everything. I've saved everything, starting with Ione's freedom. You don't understand the consequences. I understand them perfectly. You're going to prison, Calvin. I'm already dead. There it was, the admission I needed. No, you're not. You're sitting right here, admitting you faked your death for money. Calvin realized his mistake immediately. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, and it's all on tape. I pulled the wire from under my shirt and placed it on the table. Calvin stared at it like it was a venomous snake. Every word, Calvin. Your confession, your threats, your admission that you're alive. Dad, you don't understand what you've done. I've done what any father should do. I've protected my family from someone who tried to destroy them. Calvin's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He looked at the screen and his face went white. Detective O'Brien, I said. Right on schedule. Through the coffee shop window, I could see police cars surrounding the building. Detective Santos entered through the front door while two uniformed officers covered the back exit. Calvin Harding, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, and insurance fraud. Calvin didn't resist as they handcuffed him. He just stared at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Dad, this isn't over. Yes, it is. As they led him away, Calvin called over his shoulder, You'll regret this. But I wouldn't regret it. For the first time in days, I could breathe again. Ione would be released within hours. My company's reputation would be restored. And justice would be served through evidence and law, exactly as it should be. The media circus exploded within hours. Son fakes death to frame stepmother led every local news broadcast. Elaborate insurance fraud scheme unraveled by father's investigation dominated the headlines. Calvin's mugshot, very much alive and very much arrested, appeared on every newspaper front page in Connecticut. The Hartford County prosecutor held a press conference that afternoon. This was one of the most sophisticated fraud schemes we've ever encountered, District Attorney Rebecca Walsh announced. The defendants created false medical documents, staged a death scene, and manipulated evidence to frame an innocent woman for murder. Ione was released at 3:17 p.m. I was waiting outside the county jail when she walked through the doors, looking exhausted but free. Is it really over? She asked. It's over. We held each other in the parking lot while reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. But I didn't care about the media anymore. My wife was innocent. My son was alive. And the truth had won. Dr. Sarah Fleming pleaded guilty to medical fraud and conspiracy charges. In exchange for her cooperation, she received 3 years in prison and permanent revocation of her medical license. Her testimony provided the final pieces of Calvin's puzzle. He approached me 6 months ago with what he called a financial planning opportunity, she told the court. He said his father was getting older and he needed to protect the family assets from his stepmother. Calvin had painted Ione as a gold digger who was manipulating me into changing my will. He'd convinced Sarah that faking his death was the only way to preserve the family fortune. He offered me $50,000 and a percentage of the inheritance if I helped him disappear, Sarah continued. He said it would only be temporary, just long enough to prove his stepmother's true nature. But the plan had been far more sinister. Calvin intended to have me declared mentally incompetent during Ione's trial, then have himself declared legally alive to claim power of attorney over my assets. He showed me psychological profiles he'd researched, Sarah testified. He said the stress of losing a child and watching a spouse face murder charges would likely trigger depression, possibly dementia. He was planning to have me declare his father mentally unfit. The insurance fraud charges came with additional consequences. Calvin's law license was permanently revoked. Meridian Holdings was dissolved by court order, with all assets frozen pending restitution payments. The life insurance company filed a separate civil suit seeking treble damages for attempted fraud. The $127,000 policy became a $1.2 million judgment against Calvin. Mr. Harding attempted to defraud our company through an elaborate death hoax, the insurance company's attorney explained. Under Connecticut law, attempted insurance fraud carries penalties of 3 times the claim amount, plus legal fees. Calvin's criminal trial lasted 6 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged medical documents, fraudulent insurance claims, conspiracy to frame an innocent person, and perjury. The phone records alone painted a damning picture. 47 calls between Calvin and Dr. Fleming during the planning phase. GPS data showing coordination on the day of the fake death. Financial records proving the creation of Meridian Holdings specifically to launder stolen inheritance money. But perhaps the most damaging evidence was Calvin's own confession, recorded during our meeting at Starbucks. "I'm already dead," his voice echoed through the courtroom as prosecutors played the tape. Calvin's defense attorney tried to argue entrapment, claiming I had coerced his confession, but the jury wasn't buying it. The defendant planned this scheme for months, the prosecutor argued in closing statements. He created fraudulent medical documents, manipulated evidence, and allowed an innocent woman to sit in jail while he played dead. This wasn't a moment of poor judgment. It was calculated, premeditated fraud. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Calvin was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. He was ordered to pay full restitution to the insurance company, plus court costs and legal fees totaling over $2 million. Judge Patricia Morrison's words during sentencing were particularly pointed. "Mr. Harding, you are a licensed attorney who swore an oath to uphold the law. Instead, you used your legal knowledge to construct an elaborate fraud scheme that victimized your own family. You allowed your stepmother to face life in prison for a crime you knew she didn't commit. This court finds your actions particularly reprehensible because they violated both legal and familial trust." Pinnacle Manufacturing survived the scandal, though it took months to rebuild our reputation. Several defense contracts were put on hold pending security clearance reviews. But eventually, our track record of honest business practices prevailed. The local business community actually rallied around us. Other CEOs who'd been following the story reached out with support and new contract opportunities. "What you did took real courage," Tom Patterson from Patterson Industries told me. "You could have stayed quiet and let your wife take the fall. Instead, you risked everything to find the truth." Ione returned to nursing part-time, working with cancer patients at Connecticut Children's Medical Center. The experience of being falsely accused had given her a new perspective on justice and compassion. "I understand now what it feels like to be powerless," she told me one evening. "Every day I was in jail, I wondered if anyone would believe my innocence. It makes me want to help other people who feel that same helplessness." The civil lawsuits continued for months. Dr. Baker. Fleming's malpractice insurance covered some of the damages, but Calvin remained personally liable for over $3 million in restitution and penalties. His assets were seized and liquidated. His downtown condo, his BMW, his investment accounts, even his law books. Everything went to pay back the people and institutions he'd defrauded. But the most significant consequence was the complete destruction of Calvin's professional and social reputation. Legal blogs analyzed his case as an example of how attorney misconduct could destroy entire families. Medical journals examined Dr. Fleming's fraudulent death certificate as a cautionary tale about corrupted medical ethics. Calvin Harding, the brilliant Harvard Law graduate who thought he could outsmart the system, became a textbook example of how greed and arrogance lead to spectacular downfall. Justice had been served, completely and publicly. 6 months later, I stood in my office at Pinnacle Manufacturing, looking out at the production floor where my employees were building equipment for a new Navy contract. The scandal hadn't destroyed us. If anything, it had made us stronger. Ione knocked on my office door. "Ian, your attorney is here." Timothy Walsh entered with a thick folder of documents. "The final paperwork from Calvin's case," he explained. "All appeals have been exhausted. The conviction and restitution orders are final." I didn't open the folder. I'd spent enough time thinking about Calvin's legal consequences. "Tim, I want to make some changes to my estate planning. What kind of changes? First, I want to establish a trust, specifically for Ione, something Calvin can never touch, even if he's released early. Smart move. Second, I want to set up a foundation for people who've been falsely accused of crimes. Legal aid, investigative support, that kind of thing. Timothy made notes as I spoke. Any particular reason for the foundation? Because I learned something during this whole mess. The truth doesn't always win automatically. Sometimes you have to fight for it. The Ione Harding Foundation for Justice launched 3 months later with a $2 million endowment. We'd help other families navigate false accusations, provide resources for independent investigations, and support wrongly convicted individuals. It felt like turning Calvin's attempted theft into something positive. But the hardest conversation was still ahead of me. Calvin had been sending letters from federal prison in Pennsylvania. I'd thrown away the first dozen without opening them, but the latest one was different, marked medical emergency in red ink. I finally opened it. Dad, I know you hate me. I understand why, but I need to tell you something important. I've been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. The doctors say I have maybe 2 years with treatment. I'm not writing to ask for money or sympathy. I'm writing to apologize. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did to Ione. It doesn't undo the pain I caused you. But I need you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. Being in here, facing death for real this time, has shown me what I became. I was so focused on money that I forgot what actually mattered. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm genuinely sorry. Calvin Ione found me reading the letter in our kitchen that evening. Bad news? She asked. Calvin has cancer. She sat down across from me, processing the information. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Part of me thinks he deserves it. Part of me still sees him as the little boy I raised alone after his mother died. Do you want to visit him? I'd been asking myself that same question since reading the letter. Would you come with me? Ione was quiet for a long moment. Ian? He tried to have me executed for a crime he committed. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to face him. You don't have to. This is my choice to make. No, it's our choice. We're partners now. Real partners. The prison visiting room was exactly what I'd expected. Cold, fluorescent lighting, plastic chairs, guards watching everything. Calvin entered wearing an orange jumpsuit, significantly thinner than when he'd been arrested. The cancer treatment had taken its toll. Dad, Ione. He seemed genuinely surprised that she'd come. Hello, Calvin, Ione said quietly. I didn't think you'd ever speak to me again. I'm not sure I will after today, but I wanted to see you face to face. Calvin looked older, worn down by prison life and illness, but his eyes were clearer somehow, less calculating, more human. Ione, I owe you an apology, a real one. You owe me 8 months of my life back. You owe me the nights I didn't sleep, wondering if I'd be executed for something I didn't do. I know. Do you? Because I don't think you understand what it's like to be completely powerless while someone destroys your life for money. Calvin was quiet for several minutes. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I convinced myself you were the enemy, that you were stealing from our family. But you weren't the enemy, I was. Why? Ione asked. Why did you hate me so much? Because you made my father happy in a way I never could, and I was jealous. The truth was finally coming out. Not the elaborate justifications or legal theories Calvin had constructed, just raw, honest emotion. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy of inheriting everything my father built, Calvin continued. But you didn't have to prove anything. He loved you just for being yourself. I reached across the table and took Ione's hand. Calvin, love is an inheritance, I said. It's not something you earn through achievement. It's something you give and receive freely. I understand that now. Too late, but I understand it. We talked for another hour, not about money or legal cases or appeals, just about family, about regret, about forgiveness. When visiting time ended, Calvin looked directly at Ione. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know, you're good for him. You make him happy in ways I never understood before. Thank you, Ione said. As we walked to our car, Ione squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I finally got my son back, just in time to lose him again." Maybe that's enough. Maybe it was. Today, Pinnacle Manufacturing employs 200 people and generates $57 million in annual revenue. The Ione Harding Foundation has helped exonerate 12 wrongly accused individuals and provided legal aid to hundreds more. Calvin died in federal prison 18 months later. I visited him the week before he passed. We talked about baseball, about his mother, about the grandchildren he'd never meet. He asked me to forgive him. I told him I already had. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't about winning or losing. They're about choosing love over hatred, truth over convenience, and family over money. If you're watching this, I hope you never have to make the choices I made. But if you do, remember this. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. And sometimes the most important thing you can restore is your own integrity. What boundaries have you had to set in your own family? Let me know in the comments below.